read
And
it.
I'll introduce Mike.
Okay.
Are we all set? Good evening, everybody in the audience and on Zoom. My name is Seth Hall. I'm a resident of Waldeboro long-term, interested in community events and politics and all that good stuff. This is the select board candidates opportunity to talk to the residents of the town, answer some questions from our moderator, who is Michael Amico on the other, well, for me on the other end of the table. He's sitting nearest to you for the Zoom viewers, with his back to you. He'll ask a number of questions, one to each candidate, and he'll cycle through the candidates for responses of 1 to 2 minutes. It's his option. And then there's a potential for candidates to respond as well to a candidate's response, but it'll be brief so we don't get bogged down. After half an hour, 45 minutes, Michael will open the questions to the audience. Anything you'd like to ask about anything either that you've heard or that you haven't, or you'd like to know about, there's nothing, no holds barred. Just as background, we have fire exits here and there. We have a claim to nonpartisan activity. Open the questions.
Sorry, I
When
was just seeing what you'd see on.
when we started this quite a few years ago, or restarted it, that seemed to be a very good format, and it's always worked really well. We have good conversations. That doesn't mean you don't need to be restricted by that, but the candidates generally understand it's nonpartisan. Michael's a new resident in town for about a year, I think, interested in all kinds of community events. In full disclosure, I should note that I believe he's running for the budget committee this election. Probably a pretty good choice. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Great. Thank you, Seth. I'm very happy to be moderating tonight. As Abden knows, and Brendan knows as well, I've been sitting in this room, and Julie knows, for most meetings since I've moved to town. So I'm happy to now be on this side of the table. I think there's very few opportunities to all be in a room to discuss Waldeboro, just generally speaking, what our ideas are about it, visions for it. So I just wanted to say that it's an opportunity to not take too lightly. And because of that, I see this just as a very hopefully energizing experience, a way to exchange ideas, hear new thoughts, and just get a feeling for where any one individual candidate's experience and background lies, and what that they can bring to the select board and to the town that's unique to them, based on your own stories and experiences and what have you. So as Seth said, I'll just ask some big picture questions. They all have had a list of those already, so there's really no surprises. And if you can all just kind of keep responses to like 1 or 2 minutes or so, I'll just watch the clock. Once everyone's had a chance to respond to a question, then feel free to follow up with someone else at the table in response. Then we will open up the floor to everyone else. And at the end, you'll all just have a chance to make a closing remark. So why don't we start actually just with each of you introducing yourselves. I understand that you're all involved and invested in the community in various ways. And as I just said, I'm interested in hearing, and I'm sure others are, how your own background and experiences gives you something unique. Maybe it's a lens or a viewpoint that wouldn't otherwise exist in this room if you were on the select board. But you can also say however else you want to introduce yourself. So we'll start with Brendan, but we won't have to go in the same order to answer questions. I'll start with someone else each time, so we all don't feel like we're just waiting for the same people in the same order. So, but Brendan, why don't you start?
Great, thanks. I'm Brendan McGurl. I've lived in Waldeboro for about 4 years. I grew up in Warren. I did all 13 years of K through 12 education in the school district. I lived around here till I was about 30, and then started traveling around for work and education and things. And I was living in Boston for about 10 years and then moved back here. I am a self-employed contractor, part-time art gallery owner, part-time art fabricator, and I volunteer on the planning board. Been on the planning board for about 2 years.
Hi, I'm Sandra O'Farrell. I've moved in Waldeboro in 1979. I raised two boys here. They went to school here. And I decided to stay here because I was struck by the community, the closeness, and where everybody cared for everybody. In fact, John Daigle's mother lived next door to me, and I had a 3-month-old baby. When the guy came to put the gas in my house, he was leaving, and she stood in the middle of the road and stopped him. We've been friends until she just died recently. So I decided that that's where I want my kids to grow up because community cares. I'm retired from H&R Block, so I don't work anymore.
Yep, I'm sure most of you in this room have seen me before. I've been on the select board for 9 years. I'm Abden Simmons. I grew up here, lived here all my life. Lived in the same house on Jefferson Street for this year will be 31 years. I've been in business for 28 years in that same location. Commercial fisherman. I've dug clams most of my life, lobstered, everything else there is to harvest on the ocean. I served on the select board for 9 years, served on the shellfish committee for over 25 years. I served on the planning board for 6 years. So I've done a lot in this building. Michael said there's not a lot of opportunities to be in this room for people to get together. That's not exactly true because we have a lot of committees. We got the planning board, we got the Sylvania committee, we got all kinds of committees that people should be joining if they're really interested in what's going on in Waldeboro. Thank you.
Becky Stevens, I grew up Midcoast, Maine, and had the opportunity to begin working here in Waldeboro in 2011. Little satellite site that Maine Health had for a PT office out on 220. And at that point, I was driving here from Lincolnville, and I tried to convince my husband. It took about 5 years for him to decide to move here because we lived about 1,000 feet from my parents in Lincolnville, and so it was a big deal to move away from having family support that close. But I just fell in love with this community and the people that live here, and I convinced him it was a great idea. So here we are. We've lived here for about 4 years. And when I was in Lincolnville, I did a lot of community service, whether it was coaching sports or, serving the kids of the community through scouting and that sort of thing. I also spent 10 years on the school committee there. So I have a bit of understanding of how budgets and how to interface with the public and get feedback on what things are going on in a school building. And I think that would serve well here. And I would, I'd just be honored to serve the people of Waldeboro by being a select.
I think it's important that we just mention, we have one candidate who isn't here tonight. We haven't been able to get him here. Billy Bragg, who most of you know, a former shellfish officer and fire department person, longtime resident, good guy. Not sure why he isn't here. We haven't heard, but he will be on the ballot as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Abden, for saying that there are opportunities for people to volunteer and get involved in the town. And in this room, as you say, as I have done, I guess what I meant, and this is an important clarification, is that we're not actually in this room talking generally about Waldeboro. We're in this room to fulfill specific tasks, be they around planning the park at Sylvania, or economic development specifically, or, the kind of run-of-the-mill stuff that the select board does. So this is an opportunity to kind of talk more broadly about Waldeboro in terms of however you want, or whatever questions you want to raise. So hopefully we can do a little bit of that this evening. So with that, the first question is about Waldeboro and how you would describe or define what makes Waldeboro unique. So we could describe Waldeboro as a family-oriented, hardworking Maine coastal town, which is completely true. But that would also describe many other Maine coastal towns and many other towns. So could you add anything that is that tells us or reveals something about Waldeboro that distinguishes it from other towns that would otherwise fit that kind of generic description? And this is a two-part question. So one is, how do you see something special about Waldeboro? And then is that feature that can be distinguished or defining for you, something that you would develop or think about more when serving on a select board? So are there features of the town that you would want to further develop, foreground, get out, beyond Waldoboro? So, take a few minutes to answer the question, what defines Waldoboro specifically for you, or what distinguishes it beyond just a generic, wonderful, great place? And would you do anything around that as a select board member in terms of further development or just communications? So who would like to start? Sandy.
So I think one of the biggest assets we have is the river. So if we look into it economically, we could use it to our advantage. You have the Pumpkin Fest in Damascotta. You have the Clam Festival in Yarmouth. You have the Lobster Festival. We have a public landing. We have the parking lot. We should think out of the box and have a shellfish festival. It's minimum cost to us. We have Crafters, which is the Waldoboro has done, for the Waldoboro Day. So we know the crafters. We have the shell people. And start something like that to bring income into the thing, to bring tourists into it and economically help us taxpayers. I know it's a little out of the box, but
So just a clarification, like you imagine something, 1 or 2 times a year around?
yearly, like these other places do.
Mhm.
And maybe been to the Pumpkin Fest, look how many people come in, look at
Yeah.
what they bring into the town, look at the money they bring into town. We have the assets here, why not use them to our advantage?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question about having assets, but why or how they're not used. I know yesterday's select board meeting, we were talking about different events, and that just one remark that was made was it's hard to find volunteers. It's actually,
So if I don't make it, I'll help volunteer if you guys decide to
Yeah.
do that, how's that?
and that's an interesting question, why might there not be enough volunteers or people able, time or interest wise? But I think otherwise that's a great suggestion. Okay, anyone else would like to go? Ed?
Yeah. I've done a lot of things in the town, being on the select board, working the river. We've cleaned up the river more than it's ever been clean in the last 25, 30 years. I was part of that project. It was a 5-year project. I made 0 out of it. It's all donated time. And people don't realize the time and effort that I've put into this town. The kayak launch over at the park, over by Hannaford, that was my idea. I went to the town planner, asked him if he could find a grant to do it. Cost the taxpayers of Waldoboro nothing. That was put in. People wanted to see the upper part of the river. And if they wanted to kayak, there was a way for them to do it. There was no other way before that to do. The fish counter for the alewives. We've been trying to get, the Davis Trust has been running out of volunteers to count fish. Seems trivial, but people standing down there day in and day out, counting fish or how many fish are coming up the river gets pretty monotonous, and people are dropping out. I wound up getting a grant, having our town planner get a grant to get electronic fish count. We've had it in for 2 years. It's worked real well. Last year, we actually got a pretty accurate count of over 260,000 fish. We've never had that many before, or we never recorded that many. And the fish counter just got done this week. And there's other assets in town, like Sandy said, I did clams at the Waldoboro Day last year, the 250th. And I thought about expanding it to Oktoberfest. And that's what we need, is other things like that, not just about beer, but we need to have food in there. We should have vendors, even vendors coming in, make it bigger than what it is now. But I've done quite a few things in this town. It's hard to say that what should be done, but what I have done. And to get the town too big would, I think, ruin the small town feel. So that's another reason why I like being on the select board, is we can slow it down so we're not like a Damascotta that's blown up and the people that's lived there all their lives are being squished out. And that's one of the biggest things that I fear in this town.
Thank you. Becky or Brendan?
I would say that the biggest asset in this town is probably the people of this town. And the people in this town have a lot of ideas, but how do we gather them together to put those ideas into action? It's always said, who do you ask to do something? The busiest person in the room, because that's the person I'll say, yes, I'll take on that one more task. So I think it's really important going forward. I would echo what Evan says, that I like the fact that Waldeboro is a small town, and I moved here from a town that started as a small town when I moved there and grew very quickly, and became something that was a little bit unrecognizable to Mainers. And so I would love to see Waldeboro keep that down home Maine feel. But what items can we take care of that people really want addressed? And in order to do that, we have to start engaging people.
I have a little different frame or an answer for this question. In the Knox, Waldo, Lincoln County area, the four biggest towns are in order: Rockland, Belfast, Camden, and Waldeboro. We have 5,100 people. The next largest town is less than 4,000 people. When you look at Waldeboro compared to those other three towns, and look at the development level, for example, Waldeboro lags way behind. And it's not a race. Waldeboro is a different kind of town. We have a really interesting combination of large areas of agricultural land, plus all of the harvesting that goes on in the river. And we have a rural, we have an urban downtown area. It's an interesting combination of all of those things. The other real distinguishing feature about it is that we have the lowest real estate prices in the surrounding area. And people are moving here because the price of homes is low, and it's going to continue to happen. This is also the biggest town by land area in those three counties. There's lots of opportunity for development. There's every expectation in my mind that this type of development is going to continue to happen. And to Abden's point, there's absolutely an element of gentrification that's going to happen with this, and controlling what the town is going to look like over the next few years is a lot of what this election is about. How does the town get developed? What do we incentivize happening? How do you keep the character of the town the same or similar, or at least, retain some of those traditions in town as the inevitable growth happens?
Okay, thank you. So I want to follow up then on the question of development, because you just addressed it, but then also it was a part of Abden's answer in terms of not letting things get too big too quickly. So obviously there's like a conflict built in there. It's like you want your town to develop, but you don't want it to develop this way or that way. And you don't want it to move too quickly, as you say, or let things go more, I don't even know, like organically. But then you risk things not happening. So to each of you, is there a type of development maybe that you think would be good to actually focus on or push, whether it's through some kind of incentives from the town, or just communications and speaking about it? Obviously, the river is a commonality in almost all of your answers, so I'm assuming that you would think about that. But over the past year that I've been here, I mean, craft fair market, apartments above shops, town landing more kind of attracted to tourists. These are a big box store. These are very different modes of development. So knowing that the town has to develop, but also being aware that you don't want to develop in a certain way, nonetheless, is there development that you would push or try to get moving in some way? Go ahead.
Also,
Go ahead, Brendan.
Housing, number one, there's an overwhelming demand for housing. We have a lot of need for low income housing, affordable housing in this town. Something like 18% of the people live below the poverty line, 30% of people live in house trailers. There's a huge need there. And I think that frankly, there's a lot of demand for people to move to the town, and there's going to be a lot of housing development. But one of the issues with this is that as more people move to town, housing prices go up. You know, we can incentivize some things to happen with home building, but you know, there's also a shortage of contractors that's in the state, and it's hard to really push that forward. To me, the types of developments that I would like to see are affordable housing. Our social services sort of need space in this town, whatever that's going to look like. And I would absolutely love to see the downtown area get redeveloped. The town just got the parking lot down there, and they've had some designs done for a couple of years now of what to do with that. And I'd be really excited to see that development happen.
The biggest thing, and I've preached this for the several years now, is whenever there's festivals around, either in Booth Bay or Rockland, there's no place to stay. Waldeboro should be a potential place for a hotel to come here. Now, when people talk about developing and having housing and adding stuff and having these big developments, you got to realize also it puts a strain on the services that the town provides as well. Fire, EMS. So that's why I say we need to keep it slow so we don't overwhelm just the town, but the town resources that we have to pay for. And that's affected by our taxes. So if we have more people coming in, that means we gotta have more services, and that could potentially raise taxes. So having it slow and easy and steady is better than throwing everybody into the mix and hoping it works. But a hotel was the big thing. We've looked at places. We had a potential for a industrial park with a hotel in it. It fell through. I mean, the town, we've looked at multiple issues and trying to find solutions to the problems. The VOA, this has been 4 or 5 years going on now. Things don't happen overnight. Same thing with Maine Health. We've been working with them for several years, trying to find a location for them to set up shop. 2 or 3 places that we've had have fallen through. So things don't happen overnight. And I hope guys realize this, that it's not that we're not doing stuff. It's just things just don't fall into place like they should, like we would like them to. But having a hotel potentially for a destination for people to come here to go to these events is still going to bring money into the town.
Becky, yours.
Sure. In terms of housing, clearly there's a need. I've been married to a building contractor for 33 years. He's not home as much as we want him to be. He's a busy guy. But having been married to a building contractor.
Oh, sorry,
33
Becky, can you speak into the microphone or move
Sure.
it closer? Do you mind just moving?
I would say that what's happened to not just the houses that exist in the market, but the cost to build a new one has tripled maybe in the last decade, something like that. And so we throw out things like we need affordable housing, and that term a little bit frightens me because I read the local newspapers, and we'll periodically see an article that talks about how the affordable housing that was put in place was not actually affordable housing. You know, the town gives land to somebody to develop it, and then the houses go up, and a bank has agreed to finance these homes, and people have stretched themselves too far, and now they feel upside down on a house. We did just have major rise in prices, so though even those folks from 10 or 15 years ago are right side up probably on value versus what they still actually owe. But all those things need to be looked at very carefully, not just for the short term sort of stuff Band-Aid fix, but how does that look economically down the road? Those things are really important to consider with housing, and I've seen it in several of the communities I grew up in and then lived in as an adult, and the short-term solution isn't always the solution that works 10 or 15 years down the road. So any proposal, I think, should be looked at very carefully. In terms of who should come and have a business here. And you threw out big box store, so I would say very unequivocally that any Walmart, Target, franchise business is not something that I would personally advocate come to this town. The payoff for what it brings you in terms of jobs. And how much money then stays locally versus how much money gets sent to out of state. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but figuring out how we revitalize that downtown area where there are some shops that are sitting open, that makes a whole lot more sense to me, because the funds that we spend there stay here.
Okay, thank you, Sandy.
So I want to come from two sides of this. I'm currently on the board of directors for RSU 40. And as of last week, we have 83 homeless kids in the district. So that's definitely a need. And I'm not familiar with all the antics for the hospice house, but they had that where LD 2003, the Division of Procurement website has grants for homeless kids. And I didn't know if that's something that we could look at to try to help these kids. I do feel we need housing in the area, but I do feel to keep the the hometown, small town look, we don't want these big, huge apartment buildings. But we need to address also the homeless kids before we worry about bringing other people in. I feel we need to take care of them first. And if you go to the Division of Procurement Services at websites, they have guides on grants, and we have the best grant writer there is, Max. So I don't know if that's something that he could look into.
Process can't be used for residential.
Oh, it can't. Okay, that's what I said. I wasn't sure what the particulars, but maybe that's something we should look at temporary housing for these people.
So what I'm hearing in all these answers is that, well, we have issues with housing. We have questions around businesses, needing more, but what kind? And we also have a question around the need for more services. Health services, social services to address a lot of these problems related, to housing and jobs. So I think we all agree on that. I'm just wondering, does anyone have like a clearer like, I don't know, order or like approach of rank of, these are all serious problems, but I think we should really tackle this first. And yes, we're going to have to not think about that other thing for a little while, but if we push this thing forward, it's going to have these kinds of effects. Anyone thinking along those lines other than, because I would agree everything that you said is something that should be addressed, but do you have a kind of more strategic way of thinking about any of this where tackling that might have other, implications for people beyond that particular problem? Anyone want to offer anything more specific in terms of where these issues sit for them in approach and strategy?
Go ahead.
Sandy, if you-
So I feel that we have Dominic Valley High School, we have a Lincoln Health Center there. We have the clothes closet, and we have the food pantry. So there is programs in effect in town that address some of the needs, not completely, but where housing is a big need, we need to have something that comes into town that would address these things. We also need to realize that is our priority. If a kid is homeless, the kid is not going to function otherwise. And it's our kids that makes our community. That's how our growth is going to come from, is from these kids.
I think the biggest thing to me too is working on keeping people in their own homes now, so they're not homeless. When Sandy talked about the kids up to the high school or SED 40 being homeless, it's kind of a little bit misleading because some of them choose not to live under their parents' rules. So that's what they considered as homeless. They have a place to stay. Not all of them. I'm not saying all of them do. There is a handful of kids that do not have a place to go. We should be looking after them, but that should be narrowed down to the kids that actually need help. The kids that do not want to follow their parents' rules, they're at that certain age that they And I'm sure every single one of the people in this room that have bucked their parents on following their rules, they decide to leave the home. But we really need to focus on the kids that actually have no place to go. And if we looked at that, and maybe there's grants, I know the high school has grants, or I can't remember the name of the program out of Rockland that
Yes.
helps
it's,
us.
The Knox Coalition.
You know, the Knox Coalition, they get money. We've tried to partner up with them as myself and Julie going to one of the school meetings is to try to partner up with them and see what we can do to help with grants. They have not reached out to us and we've tried. So the help they need, we can help with, and they don't seem to want to help. They want to keep these numbers for some reason. I don't understand, but they're not asking us for help.
So can,
Can we let the
Okay.
other and then you?
I just wanted to spin off what you were saying.
Sure. I don't think we can say, let's look at only housing.
Mhm.
Let's look at only business. Let's look at only infrastructure. It's gonna be a hard sell to hire more EMS and more fire personnel if the goal is to then build housing in 3 or 4 years. And we'll have people that may need those services. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to focus on housing if we don't have the infrastructure. So they're really symbiotic and they have to all sort of develop pretty naturally together. I don't think you can push one versus another.
Do you think that they would happen naturally together if you don't take an
I-
active
I-
role in directing?
I think it can be directed, but I don't think you can direct and just do one versus doing another. You know, if you think you need 100 housing units here, we probably shouldn't put in 100 housing units and then worry about what to do about the other things that need to also be in place. So stages make sense to me, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with Becky on that. I don't think that you can really pick one of these out and say, do this first and then get around to the rest of it later. You know, just like you can't, you know, look at grant writing as a solution for an acute homelessness problem. You know, like the problems, that problem needs to be, you know, really addressed with money that we can put our hands on immediately, because, you know, frankly, by the time you write a grant and receive the funds, you know, school is going to be over for a lot of these kids that are in need right now. Yeah, to me, the sort of the root of a lot of these problems, you know, keeping people in their homes, the active homelessness problem with especially students, it comes down to income levels in town, and growing the economy will help that. It will increase wages, funding schools will help that. That also leads to increased wages and increased, you know, income levels and tax revenues, which help to keep everybody's tax burden down. It's, you know, growing our way out of the problem, to me, seems like the most likely solution. Or we can, you know, try to tamp down growth and keep rolling along at, you know, 18% of our neighbors living below the poverty line.
Thank you. It also sounds like, just echoing Abden, that, you know, maybe we don't have as great of a grasp on the different problems that we say we do. So, that there may need to be more like data collection, because clearly problems register in the public discourse in a way that signals a problem, but doesn't actually explain it or necessarily help it. And so, you know, I wonder if the select board could actually think about more of its work about gathering data to it. Who actually is homeless? What does that mean? Because these things mean different things for different people. But I want to just follow up on that general question that by focusing on the community center. So this has been a long time discussion point in the town, and there's potential that the community center will come sooner rather than later. What do you think should be in that community center? And might that actually tell us something about what you think could best be served most immediately, at least in that kind of a structure? Sandy?
Okay, so can I spin off
Yes,
what
sorry
Abden
about that.
said?
Go ahead.
I know Abden and Julie, because I was at the meeting, they have several times got a hold of Knox Coalition and asked them to partner with them, maybe do something, and they have not responded. You know, so I know it's not like they've ignored the issue, they've actually addressed it.
Right.
And on the 83, you're right, it could be a kid sitting on somebody else's couch, but they still have to count them because they don't have a permanent home. Whether it's because they chose to be obstinate or not, it's one of those things. But as far as the community center, I will say this, it needs to address the senior citizens. We need to have a senior citizen center. We also need to have programs for the kids. I'm trying to think, athletic. We need to have different programs that would tail all ages. We need to have a meeting house. This is very small and we can't use it. The community center should have a place that if people want to use it for something, it should include all of it, not just one particular group.
Others, community center?
First of all, one of our biggest plans that we've always thrown out there is having the Head Start. That was one of our biggest things, is getting Head Start into the community center, having areas for the older generation. I keep saying that, but I'm getting there.
And you're looking at
I'm
me,
getting
right?
there. I'm getting there. I'm older than I look, trust me. But the older generation, we need to have daycare. That's a huge issue. Now, being in politics, I've talked to a lot of people, and the biggest problem, and we talk about workforce all the time, is parents can't find people to take care of their kids so they can go to work. So they're stuck home. That's your workforce, is though they have no place to take them to get them to be able to go to work. That's your workforce, and that's what the biggest thing I think we really need to focus on is a daycare. We already have a summer recreational program that could go up there, and that's full every year now. I mean, any number of kids can be there. I can't remember exactly what Marcus told us was kids, but the program is full. Now we've turned it into a bigger program than we ever expected. And now right now it happens at Miller School. It should be in our own building. We should be reaping the benefits of that for the kids. I mean, granted, the kids that are usually going there go to that school anyways, so they're familiar with it, but I think they should have other places to go. But that's two of the three things that are big to me.
There's a Head Start in town.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, there is, yeah,
Yeah.
but our deal was always to try to get them into the community center.
Okay. So I certainly, as a parent of 8 children and a grandparent of 2 grandsons, would say that finding quality daycare for your children is certainly an issue. And as a physical therapist, I would say having a community center that, particularly in the winter months, is available for people to get in and get some exercise and activity makes a whole lot of sense. I for many years would tell patients to head down to Lowe's and just do a few laps, even if you don't need anything there. Or you need a hammer, but go do 6 laps around Lowe's first and then get your hammer so you can get your steps in without falling down. So, you know, those same populations that everyone else thinks needs service, but you know, what does that look like and how is that space utilized to its best ability? The other thing I would like not to happen with that building is not to duplicate services that are happening effectively in other locations. We currently have 3 very large buildings that are used 180 days a year, which means 180 days a year they're not in high use. And so it would make sense to me not to create a space that duplicated a service that could happen elsewhere. I'd also, we have 3 large buildings that are not in the best repair, and so I would like to see what a plan looks like so that in 25 years, we don't have 4 large buildings.
Which large buildings?
At our schools, we have 3 large buildings. And so it's not just about a short-term solution, but long-term, what's the cost implication to taxpayers to maintain another building?
I find this to be a really interesting question. I think there's been some good suggestions put out there. To me, coming from a design and construction background, the important thing for me to do as somebody who would be on the select board would be to actually not add my ideas to this, because that's sort of the role of the community engagement in the design process. You know, I've been through conferences like these a number of times. The way that it usually works is you have meetings like this, you gather people in the community, and you start to bring in the ideas to figure what is popular, what is not popular, and then your architect that's doing the design will come and do the programming of it. I think that, excuse me, I think that having some sort of a recreational facility has broad support. While I totally understand the need for daycare, I don't know that that's something that the town wants to be directly providing. Maybe that would be a situation where like a space gets leased to a daycare, but I think that that is one of those things that sort of belongs as a private business rather than something that's being provided by the town for a number of reasons.
Okay, so I'll ask another question that's related from a different angle then, which is actually it's something that Becky was talking about, which is the general health of people, like getting them moving and exercising. So maybe my question would be is what I'm going to say more of the role of a town rather than just citizen input, but driven by a select board. The general walkability and bikeability of the area. So we have wonderful trails around, but they're not all connected up. We have some sidewalks in town, but they don't go everywhere, and some of them kind of stop and then start up again, or there's potholes and things. So it's not an atmosphere or an environment that invites people to be outside in the village, walking around. Certainly not in as robust sense as it could be. But we also know that there was a very successful art walk this past Friday, stressing stress on the word walk. So all these people having fun moving around the village. So would any of you do anything or think about how the town might help just better the connective infrastructure of the town, sidewalks, bike paths, things like that? What's your opinion on that? And do you see any role for the select board in moving any of that kind of design thinking forward?
Yeah, the sidewalks are a problem in town. There's no way to walk from the village to Miller School. Sidewalk ends before you get to the school. There's no way to walk from the village to where the Concord Trailways picks up. The sidewalk ends before you get there. It's a small thing that we should really fix. You know, I think that's a no-brainer. I'm very excited to see the elevated sidewalks coming into the village. I think that's going to do great things for keeping the speed of traffic down in the village, which will definitely help make it walkable. I have, on a couple of occasions had to help people cross the street because old ladies are standing there with their grocery baskets trying to get to the grocery store, and traffic just doesn't stop for them, and there's I think adding all of this stuff would really help to connect the walkability of the town together.
I think the biggest thing is people don't realize that a lot of these areas that the sidewalk ends, it's all state road. 90% of this is state road, so the town has no jurisdiction whatsoever. We have over 5 miles of sidewalk in the town, believe it or not. And we petition the state constantly, the DOT constantly. It took us several years to get the signs on 235 and up on 220. It took us several years to get what you're talking about in the downtown. This doesn't happen overnight, and we're at the mercy of the DOT. We can petition them all they want, and it just, when they have the funds to do it, they will allow us to do it. Julie's had great success with DOT. She's had a good relationship. That's why we've gotten the stuff we've got. But it's this, the select board can do everything they possibly can, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get done. with the sidewalks. And like I said, we're at the mercy of DOT, so if we could step in and do it, we would do it. That's not the issue. The issue is fighting with DOT with that. And with the bike trails and stuff like that, I believe the Sylvania committee has been working on a bunch of that stuff with the Sylvania property and doing a river walk and potentially having a bike trail. You're dealing with, when you put bike trails in certain places, you're dealing with private landowners. Not all of them are gonna agree with what you're doing. So it's an uphill battle that way as well.
I would say that having the sidewalks that we have here be more usable makes a whole lot of sense. I live on Depot Street, so I hit a dead end pretty quickly, going out there, but that's okay. We just walk it multiple times. Adding a whole lot more at this juncture with the needs that are in this town, I don't think makes a whole lot of sense. Given the state of the schools and some of the projects that really need to take priority, I wouldn't say spending a whole lot of time or money on putting in more sidewalks and more trails. I don't think this is the juncture for it. I think that's something that is punted down the way as a project that would be beneficial to the town people, but not something that makes sense to do at this point.
So I do know that the trails that are in town, because I'm zone chair for the Waldeboro Alliance. We have been going in and we've been clearing out the paths and the trails, and they're trying to widen them for mobility for the handicapped. So they are doing the trails, and as far as the sidewalks in town, it doesn't address everybody, and I agree, we do have priority. But I do also know that we have the track at the high school, that if there's not a track meet going on, people are allowed to walk it. And it's a quarter of, you do it 4 times, you get a mile. And that's open for the public. It's your school.
Okay, thank you. I just have sort of 2 more questions before we open it up. One is about just engaging the town more generally in these questions and these issues. So, as Americans, we are the cultivators of an ongoing tradition of self-governance, let's say. And in this town, the select board would be the most explicit form that takes. So in some ways, I feel like there's an opportunity serving on the select board to raise civic awareness, civic conscience, civic involvement among the town. So how might you increase town feeling, town spirit, or just involvement? Do you have any specific ways of thinking about that?
We certainly have access to many free online survey creators. And I think that those tools could certainly be utilized to both inform and get feedback from the folks that live here and what they want and what they're looking for prior to putting our dreams into fruition here.
I think the biggest thing for me is people are working, they have lives. And getting people to join some of the committees that we have, it's real tough. I mean, it takes a lot of time. People don't realize, being on the planning board, you may only be there once or twice a month, but you may be there for 2 or 3 hours a night. Well, a lot of people have to go to work the next day, so people just do not apply for those positions because it's just that much more they have to do in their life. And some people are working 2 jobs, so they don't have the time to do this. And it's tough. I mean, a lot of our boards haven't been completely filled. And we put that out there constantly. It's on the website. We post it outside. It's on the front of the desk out in front of the office. We can only do so much. We can't make people join the committees. We try to encourage them to join, but we can't make them join. And it makes it tough. I mean, we advertise everywhere we possibly can. We want people to get involved, just like you guys here tonight. There's only 20 people here. Where's the other 4,910? Just to throw a number out there. Where are they? They have lives. It's no different. You guys are engaged, you're interested, and other people are engaged in different things, like the recreational department Recreation, the Sylvania Committee. There's different people and different backgrounds that want to be on these committees.
So I'm fortunate, I'm retired, but I have volunteered myself out of a life, which you can justify. I'm on the board of directors for the RSU 40. I've been on it for 13 years. I have been on the budget committee here. I am part of the Lions Club. I am on the food pantry. I helped establish the clothes closet. There's only so many hours in a day. So he's right. You can't get people to volunteer. And when you do, they find somebody that's, oh, you can do it. But even I can only do so much.
It's a really interesting question. On the planning board, we see a lot of people who are interacting with their town government for the first time. And, people are frequently, sort of concerned about the negative outcomes that might happen. My experience interacting with the town government is that one of the great things about this being a small town is that there's not that many voices that engage with the town government, and you can really be heard here. Sort of to Abden's point, like, how do you make people care more about it? Like, people are busy. Like, I think that you see when there are issues that hit close to home, there's a lot of civic engagement. You know, there's a lot of civic engagement with the school board right now because there's a problem. And it's too bad that people can't sort of see our institutions here in the town government as an opportunity to change things for the better. And it's, you know, it's pretty easy to volunteer your time and make an impact. I guess that's what I got to say on that.
Okay, so here's my like fun ending question. Is that setting aside what is necessary now or what we can't afford not to think about now, thinking ahead in 10 to 20 years, imagine yourself driving into Waldoboro 10, 15, 20 years. What would you like to see differently, or something newly accessed, or just something looks or is designed differently or better, or realizes something that you long held as an aspiration for Waldoboro that maybe in your time and the select board you worked just a little bit toward, but it took a while, so that in 10, 20 years when you come in, you're like, wow, there's that thing, and now we can do this, or now it looks that way. What would be that thing for you, Sandy?
Hopefully new sidewalks. But on a serious note, being on the school board for a number of years and due to the economy and COVID. And with COVID, with the internet, a lot of students have not been able to progress in their learning. So I would like to see internet in the town because I think the childrens need to do it. There are people that are not have access to things that they should have access to because of it. And I also think we need to look at our buildings. Our school district, one of the biggest things when you move into a district is what does the school offer? You look at our buildings and they're not encouraging. You know, and it's not an overnight thing that can happen, but it's something that I would look at a school when I moved in with my kids. I mean, I think everybody does. So to bring the younger group in, which is bringing the younger businesses, we need to offer them the structure, the schools. We have a cute downtown, and for some reason, businesses don't stay. So we need to offer something in town. But I do hope in 20 years, and I do, that it's still the quaintness, that people are friendly, and they do generally care about each other, is which I feel now. When I had a fire, it made me a sense of belonging, and I'd like to have somebody else feel the same.
I'd like to see when people are coming from Rockland and they hit that light at Moody's, that there's a long line to go left to get downtown. That downtown is a destination and that people don't just drive through Route 1 without ever seeing what Waldoboro looks like.
I've pushed this for the last probably 6 years, 7 years. is turn Old Route 1 into Business Route 1. Is we should have that something, we haven't figured out how to get that to catch, but I think that's the only way you're gonna get downtown to revitalize, is you need traffic. Traffic that people wanna come through and do business in town. And I think that's, we need signage, but we need to have it directed as,
Send them down there.
yeah, that's been my,
Detours.
it's been my goal for the last several years, is trying to turn that into a
That's
a
detour.
business Route 1.
The first thing that comes to mind for me, if I'm driving into town 20 years from now, is I'd like to see that our high school's been replaced. That's number one thing. The school was old when I was there 30 years ago. I can only imagine what it's like now.
50+ now.
Yeah, I know.
My mother was the first class to graduate
It
from,
was 68,
my mother
right?
was in the first class to graduate from the Don Valley.
Yeah, it's an old building. It needs to be replaced. And it's gonna be expensive. And I wish I could explain in a couple of minutes why it's gonna be so much more expensive to wait to replace it than it is going to be to just go and do it. The school board presented a good plan about creating a STEM wing that would remain after the old building got demolished. They put forth a reasonable budget for that. I've worked building schools, building all kinds of different structures and things for various governmental agencies. I'm very attuned to what's going on in that market, and it's gotta happen. It will change the fate of the town to build a new school.
Thank you. So we're an hour in, which is perfect time to turn to the audience and open it up to questions. So if you have one, just raise your hand and Steve.
Go to the podium.
Sure. Okay.
Hi, I'm Steve Carp. My question is for Brendan. Flags are important. Usually people fly them because they signify something important to them. Your Palestinian flag on your property has become a talking point here in Waldoboro. So if you could tell us why this flag is important to you, why you're flying it, especially in light of current events concerning Israel and the rise of anti-Semitism in this country.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm opposed to the ongoing genocide in Palestine. Every day I flip open my phone and there's a new series of photos of kids getting American bombs dropped on them, and I'm opposed to that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions?
I get a question.
Sure.
Why do you think we need a new high school when it's gonna be declining?
Excuse me?
Why do you think we need a new high school now, when it's declining of people,
What's declining?
the people?
The student population is declining.
The student population is the same as it was when I went there in the 90s. Pretty much exactly the same. I don't know about the short term up and down. We don't need a new school because of the increased number of kids. You need a new school because the building is 60 years old. Generally speaking, this is the lifespan of a institutional building.
Why
You know-
is a new school gonna help them?
Because new school buildings result in improved performance by students. The science on this is been documented for decades. You will have better educational outcomes, which lead to higher wages, which will lead to less poverty, which lead to increasing the fortunes for everybody in Waldoboro. It's an investment in the future. We deserve this. We deserve to give this to our kids.
Just repair it.
So I know that the importance of the schools, the buildings included, have been brought up by I think almost everyone here. So please, you can all respond or comment as you want.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I'm the chair of the facilities for the RSU 40. I am one of the ones that helped initiate the bond. And I am also one of the ones that go to the schools every day that move buckets because the roofs are leaking. We have children that have to walk over these buckets. We have got children that have, if you're gonna learn something, excuse me, if you want a child to learn, you need to give them an environment where they feel comfortable, where they feel safe. And if you get an old building, it's an old building. And I don't know about you, if I'm sitting in an old building, it doesn't encourage me to do a lot of things. Do we need to do it all at once? No, but I think we need to really look at the structures of our buildings. We need to offer these kids that they feel safe, that they feel comfortable. And it brings in people. If you look at it, if you look at the high school, I don't know about you, but it doesn't impress me. So if you're moving into town, you need to look at the schools, you need to see what it offers. And also the kids need to they're entitled to it. I mean, that's part of their learning, that's part of their education. It's part of their mindset. If you go into a school and it's driving and there's buckets you gotta walk over, But if you go into school and it's bright and it's cheerful, it's a mindset, and that helps the kids learn. It does make a difference in the learning structure of the kids. And there's 1,800 kids in this district, by the way. 1,838, I think it is. Don't hold me on the last, but it is over 1,800 in this district that will be hitting that high school.
I mean, I would just say I work for RSU 40, so that's a different perspective, and I work as the district-wide PT, so I'm in every building in the district on a weekly basis, other than one of the elementary schools that doesn't have any student at this point that needs PT. The buildings have issues, 100%. You know, there are things there that need addressing and things there that need addressing basically immediately. The concern I do have is that the tax bills cannot be sustained in this town, and so there needs to be a balanced approach to how we get the buildings up to snuff. You know, personally, my tax bill would have gone to over 8,500 had that passed. That's a big tax bill. And so, and I don't live in like the nicest house in town, but how do we balance that where we're taking care of the infrastructure needs without forcing people out of town? Because that's the other reality, that you fix the building and yeah, it looks pretty, but nobody can afford to live here. So how do we find that balance? And frankly, that's a school board scenario.
John?
John Burgess, Waldeboro. Would one of you like to talk about how it's, I forget, it's 9+ teacher positions that remain unfulfilled, and that some won't consider it based on the facilities, and that this is a legacy issue. This is something that today we've inherited because years ago there was a policy of not spending a dime on maintaining the buildings. Would any of you like to talk about that?
Well, I could address that because because I'm on the finance committee too. What is happening is a lot of these schools in the district, whether it's Bath, whether it's Brunswick, whether it's Camden, they offer more money. Is the bottom line, it's the dollar. So these teachers are going to these positions that are paying more. We have tried to keep it at a level where we're in between. But due to the buildings and our other priorities, we haven't been able to keep up to par to these other schools. So if it's a person that goes to another school and they get offered $30,000 more, of course they're gonna take that versus what we can afford to give them. And that's basically the problem. It's finances.
It's also a general teacher shortage throughout the
Yeah.
state. It's
Yeah.
not just an RSU 40 scenario.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at what openings exist in other school districts, even the local ones, but you know, I look at serving schools pretty regularly. That's the media for advertising those positions, and it is an incredible list for the state of Maine.
I think the biggest thing too is, it's not just the schools, you got EMS, you got police department. As you have seen, we have, during budget season, we've had to go up on our prices because we're competing with other towns. And it's not just at the school level, police department, EMS, there's a pool of people out there that we're drawing from. There's nobody getting into these industries. So we're fighting over the same people, and that's what's really driving our taxes, is we're competing with bigger towns that can pay more money. You know, it don't sound like a lot, but $2 an hour, they can go to, a police officer can go to Rockland and make $4,000 more a year and do the same job. And they gotta drive 20 minutes. So it's tough to keep teachers in place because they can drive a half an hour and get, like Sandy said, $20,000 more a year. So it's tough for us to compete with that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think the public needs to understand. in
Exactly.
Waldeboro
Yeah,
is-
and you've seen it during the budget cycle. Is we've had no choice. Back 2, 3 years ago, we was paying our EMS top of the line $19 an hour. You could go to Walmart and stock shelves for $19 an hour. We had to do something at the town level. We had no choice. We went up $10 an hour to our top people. We had no choice. Because other towns, people were driving to Bath, Brunswick, Hollowell, other places and making the money that they could potentially make over and above what we were paying. I mean, we was going with EMS positions not being filled, 150 schedules not being filled a month. There's people putting in 3, 4, 5,000 hours a year to fill those positions. And that's not fair to the employee, that we get burnout. And then you lose them, then you don't have them in the pool. So, when the school isn't unique to not having people apply for the job.
If I might, the quality of the facilities that the teachers are going to work in is also a part of the factor about their decision-making process. Somebody might be offered the same amount of money in a different school district, but choose to stay here if they like working here, if they like the facilities that they're working in. If I'm a science teacher and I have to walk into a 1965 era science lab every day to teach kids, it's not exactly inspiring. And if I can go make the same money in another town that has new facilities, that makes me feel better about going to work every day, then yeah, like it's also, we're competing for this labor. And if we choose to not invest in the schools, we're choosing not to compete for the best talent that we can hire for our kids.
Yeah, something quick about the schools.
So to spit off in his lab, okay, it's true. We're finding that these kids are getting to college and they got equipment there and they say, wow, we never saw that. Because our labs are so archaic. So when they get to these colleges, they're saying, oh, where'd that come from? And it's really too bad that is happening. But I do know that being on the facilities committee, we have this energy efficiency company coming in that we've already structured into our budget. The payment to do it. We're gonna do the asbestos, we're gonna do the roofs and the ventilation, which is priority. It's to the health of the kids. It's one of those priority things. It doesn't do the cosmetics, it doesn't do the other stuff. It does the basics. So we're putting another Band-Aid on it. But just a bigger one this
Other
time.
questions? Willie?
Hi, Willie Wildman, new resident to Waldeboro. My question is, what, in your perspective, makes a great select board person? Like what either characteristics or what skills, competencies, and then also from your perspective, what would enable you to do the best job if elected? Is it set up right now for you to do what you need to do, or would you need other things to happen for to unlock your capacity to do the best job as a select board person?
I would say, having integrity in your communication with people and being open to that communication is probably paramount to what I would bring to the table. I see interface with a whole lot of people. I worked as a PT in a outpatient practice and saw maybe 1,500 people over 10 years. I know a lot of people that are willing to walk up to me in the grocery store and start to chat with me about things that are going on in town. And now being in the school system, I work with a lot of students and families. And again, it's just that ability to have a conversation with somebody and they feel like they're able to speak openly about what their concerns are and what they see is going well and what they see is not going well. And then bring that information back.
Well, for me, I'm gonna continue to do what I do. Everything that comes through, we try to do the best ability just like the VOA, Maine Health. We got other projects that could potentially be coming that we've been working on, moving them forward. We just had an issue with an ambulance. We were supposed to have a new ambulance this year. We gonna make an executive decision we have a potential to buy one right now. It's $20,000 more, but we got a grant. We're gonna make it happen. We need that ambulance to serve the people in this town. You know, and it's making those decisions and not kicking the can down the road to get things solved is a big issue for me. I get very frustrated when things don't happen, when I like to have them happen. But it is what it is. Being on the board for the last 9 years, I've learned to adapt to it. You know, things aren't gonna happen overnight. You know, like I said, VOA, I've actually been on that issue, not as the VOA, but having the 80 Gray building removed years ago. Put it in the budget. Back when I started that 5-6 years ago, it was $140,000 to do. We could have got a grant to do it. When we had it done this year, I think it was almost 300,000 to have it torn down. Luckily, it didn't cost the taxpayers anything. We was able to get a grant to do that. But this process of having affordable housing or senior living, that's the biggest issue with me is there's people in this town that can't afford or can't maintain that property. So one way to do that is people have to leave their homes, sell their homes. There's no place for an older person to live. They have to go to Brunswick, Rockland, Camden, all over the place. Well, they're a Waldeboro resident. So they're being displaced. So hopefully now with having the VOA come in, we'll have a place for the people that's lived here all their life to stay.
So I have been on the RSU 40 board. I've been on the curriculum, the policy. I'm currently the finance vice chair of the finance, and and the chair of the facilities committee. I also have been on the budget committee for the town here. I have also one of the ones that set up the clothes closet in town. I volunteer for the food pantry. I am currently a Lion. I've been a Lion for 15 years in the district. I've been assistant treasurer and president of their now zone chair. Do I know it all? No, but I do know that I have 4 other people on the board that what I don't know, I don't have a problem asking.
I don't know the answer to what makes a great select board member. I don't have anything to offer for that. I can tell you that my experience interfacing with various governmental agencies in my career sort of gives me the skills to navigate that situation. My project management training helps me understand how to make this work happen, how to engage stakeholders to make sure that the projects that we're doing in town are actually successful and sustainable. And those are the business skills that I would bring to the select board.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
The biggest thing too is it's not just the select board. Everyone focuses on us. You don't realize the people that are behind us. They do all the work. We throw out the suggestions. They come back with the answers. And with the planner, with our code enforcement, with our town manager, our finance director, they guide us on what is happening. We make those decisions, but they guide us on what's happening. We ask the questions, they find out the information for us. So it's not just the select board that does this. And people need to realize that.
So just to follow up on Willie's second part of Willie's question, because you've been around working for a while in the town, and Sandy as well, serving on board, Brent, on boards in the town. Do you see any potential for different kinds of workflows, organization that would better allow for decision-making, involvement? I don't know, do you have any, comments about the structure of how things happen? I mean, I know you're in the room, so we can't be critical of like, of any, and I don't mean to be about, it's not about a person, but it's just about, government and how it works, and also I was just talking recently with someone about you know, how in New England, at least in this town, you know, the voters have to vote on to approve a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
Where in other towns, the select board can just approve it. You know, so that's a real difference in how things happen. And that's a New England American, I mean, there's really interesting things to say about that historically. So, I don't know, anyone have any thoughts about the organization as a whole of the town and what happens? Yeah.
Communication. It's the biggest asset there is. Listen. Get input, whether it's through the internet, and if people can't do the internet, there's the Lincoln County News, there's the Lincoln County TV. There's people talking, but you have to listen. You have to know the people that you're trying to help or you're addressing at the time. And just listen. That's the biggest thing I think you can do.
Biggest thing for me is the information's there if people really want to know it. I mean, this year, our budget meetings were the longest they've been in the last 7 years. I mean, we had multiple nights and there was very little participation in the audience. And the reason why those ballots are so long is because we want the people in the town to have a choice to vote on every single thing. And that makes a big difference. A lot of towns, I know there was a bill in the legislature that would limit what the towns could do, and the select board can make those decisions. What good does that do the town itself and the people in the town? And I think we offer as much input for the town to vote on as we can.
Other questions? Sir?
Hi, Andy Blackwell, long-term resident here. What businesses would be appropriate for Waldeboro, and how do we make Waldeboro more attractive to bring those businesses into town?
I think the biggest thing is we need infrastructure. We're in the middle of a hill here, and having water and sewer is not easy. Like I said, with putting business Route 1 down through, so people will create more foot traffic or whatever in the middle of town. There's a big hill. Getting stuff up those hills, hot pipes and water lines and sewer lines. It's a real challenge. We talked about right across from 235, there was a piece of property there that we were looking at potentially having it developed, getting someone to develop it. It was gonna be, I can't remember, $1 or $2 million just to put water and sewer lines up there. It's not a just go in and do it type of thing. It's a long-term planning. And infrastructure is a big issue. And the money, and sometimes the money's there and sometimes we get it. I mean, for the property up on Depot Street, we get $1 million for our rec facility and for Maine Health to go. You know, it helps, but until that's in there, it doesn't do us any good. But I mean, the only way we're gonna attract businesses is having infrastructure. And that affects property taxes. So the first line of defense is going after grants. That's what I push for everything.
I just want to respond to how to keep or attract businesses, particularly in town.
Your question was what types of businesses are appropriate?
Yeah.
The infrastructure problems that Ed was talking about are real. What I would love to see is more small business growth in the town. There's a big push right now with a lot of people who are entrepreneurs who are coming to town and starting businesses, and that's great. There aren't a lot of real stable jobs with real stable companies that come to town, and I don't really know what the answers for that are. My assumptions are that it has to do with the workforce that we have available and what kind of workers are available here. Again, going back to the quality of education and our students' fortunes. You know, if there's available workforce and available consumers, businesses will come to the town. The infrastructure is a problem.
Have that before you have
for some
anything else.
developments, yeah. In business school, one of the things that they teach you is when you're starting a business, you go and you pick your customers. And if you're gonna pick a town around here, There's a reason why we don't have a Walmart or, you know, other large businesses coming into the town. And it has a lot to do with the income levels and like, how many of the people in town are you gonna convert on a weekly basis to come into your business? And when you have 18% of the population living below the poverty line, and a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck, you know, there isn't a lot of money to go around for people to go and go to businesses. And so if you are gonna go site your new Walgreens, you know, you're probably gonna skip over Waldeboro and you're gonna go to a town that is going to put your business in a better position to succeed. And that's kind of where we sit right now, I think.
By the way, there was gonna be a Walgreens in Waldeboro, but one person held out and wouldn't sell. There was gonna be, there was a potential for it years ago.
They
It
asked
was
us-
great, it's not great.
They asked us where I land for Walmart.
Cause it was gonna happen right across the road from my house, so.
Yes, you have another question in the back?
Yes, on the people way there. What's your go on illegal immigration? Why are these, you know, school students homeless? And illegal immigration is getting you burned.
I don't think there's anything that the select board can do about illegal immigration.
Yeah, but we should be able to put our Americans first before illegals.
That
in
may
our
be,
town.
That's
it's just not
Federal.
something that a select board person could, you know, address probably in the way that you're
Why don't
imagining.
we have like a vote on the people on a ballot or
That would be illegal.
why?
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I understand there are quite a few subsidized housing or areas in Waldeboro. And I'd like to know if anybody has ever seen where the people come from who end up living there. You're speaking about Volunteers of America and that the Waldeboro elderly will be able to live there. My understanding is that would be a waiting list, and whoever signs up first gets in. And that people from other towns can come to that there's no guarantee that it will be Waldeboro elderly that will be able to live there.
Not all of them, no. I know we've talked about this, we've made that very explicit to Volunteers of America. That Waldeboro residents come first. But they said not guaranteed that they will all apartments will be filled with Waldeboro residents.
But I think it's more like who's ever on the waiting list first gets in. I don't think
know.
it's a certain number or reserved to Waldeboro residents. But the low income housing, subsidized housing, it would be interesting to look at where those people come from. And if there are Waldeboro residents.
I've dealt with this a lot on the planning board during the approval process for the project, and what they have said repeatedly is that they had all of their projects throughout the region. I believe it was 3/4 of the residents in their buildings in those towns, they moved there from that same town. Like they moved from their home in Rockland into their VOA facility in Rockland, and that's like 3/4 of the people there. And the reason why they can't earmark these things for people is because the way that their process works is they go and develop the project and then they go seeking funding. And the funding has strings attached to it. And none of those strings are going to allow for set asides for citizens of Waldeboro, because they're coming from, you know, various NGOs that are, you know, not going to allow for that. They want to, you know, there needs to be
Well,
equity in that.
I came here from South Portland. And we had a beautiful building for elderly housing right on the water.
Mhm.
And federal government came along and said, no, you have to take disabled people as well. Well, a lot of the disabled people that came in were subsidizing their income with drug money. And my understanding, and I have relatives that lived in that building, that the elderly were afraid to even go out in the hall because there were drug deals going on all over the place. Now, this is not proven facts that I can give you, but observations from people that I know who have lived there.
Okay. I can't speak to you about how VOA kind of operates.
I'm only making the observation so that people on this select board and people who make the decisions for this town can understand that this is a concern.
Sure, yeah, and
But
the
it might not
age,
be a concern that could be addressed by decisions made by the town, which is the real difference.
You're absolutely right.
Sandy,
So I understand the town, when they allow a business to come in, they can only do so many stipulations.
I can't hear you.
When a
I have a
town,
disability, I can't.
okay, when a town addresses a business coming in, they can only, I think they can only address a certain number of stipulations, correct?
Well,
Because it's any business. I mean, you can't tell them how to run their business. We can ask, we can say, we want these stipulations, but it's, in the long run, it's their business. And if we start restricting businesses, businesses aren't gonna come here.
Okay, but I personally did some research on Volunteers of America. And their people in California ended up committing fraud and embezzling money and ending up in jail. And I just don't know.
okay,
if
but we
anyone
can't be
here-
impugning,
Excuse me, if anyone here ever did any research on their own to see what this group is all about.
so I think it's time for closing statements, so if you'd all like to speak for a few minutes in closing, say whatever you'd like, and thank you all for being here, and it is recorded, so other people can check out what we've been discussing, so I appreciate everyone's presence. So anyone would like to start?
You want me to start?
Yeah, we start down the line.
I think I bring a fairly broad perspective to the select board. I have a lot of healthcare experience. I've worked in healthcare for 30 years. I've been on a school board for 10 years and now working in the school system. I see the things that happen there day in and day out. I hear the concerns from parents. I hear concerns from students. In my time on the school board in Lincolnville, we had some infrastructure issues that needed to be addressed. We always had staffing issues that needed to be addressed. And all of those things, but any of that experience aside, you know, what I really bring is my desire to serve the town of Waldeboro. And, you know, that's what I'm hoping to do. Come and serve by listening to the people and bringing that information to town administration and trying to meld that.
Well, I've been on the select board for the last 9 years. We've had huge accomplishments. Before Julie came 7 years ago, we have a policy of our fund balance being between 60 and 90 days of security for the town. Before Julie got here, we had 42 to 45 days. And as of this year, we was at 120 days. And that's why the town budget as a government did not go up. It's because we turned that money back to the people. The town is in really good shape, and I'd like to continue to keep it that way as being on this board.
So, I've lived in this town since 1979, okay, and I have been I'm still currently on the school board. I've been on the budget committee. I've been part of the Lions for 15 years. I've done the closet, I've done the food pantry. So I think through the broad variety of the things I have done, that I hear needs of the town. And I hope to be a bridge between the voters and the select board. But then again, I'm part of a committee. I'm 1 of 5. I can't do it all by myself. I have to listen to them and I have to get their advice because I would be new at this at first, but I'd like to serve my community because I've been doing it for years.
I'm running for select board because there's things that I want to change about this town. There's things that there's changes that are going to happen whether we invite them or not. And I want to be a part of guiding good solutions for that type of growth. I'm passionate about seeing the most vulnerable people in our community get taken care of. There's a lot of homelessness, there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of people in need in this town that the town could really do a better job taking care of. And there's been some great strides made recently along that front. And you know, if I'm on the select board, I'll certainly be voting to grow and strengthen those programs and to you know, grow the town for the future so we can enjoy the prosperity that the other big 3 towns in the region enjoy.
Great. So thanks, everybody, for coming to the Waldeboro, to the 2024 Waldeboro Meet the Candidates Forum. We hope this will be an ongoing operation every election. We have interesting people, as you can tell, obviously, coming to town and offering what they think might be useful to all of us, the residents. I think we